The Desperate Deal. The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Cross Industries' 42nd floor as Damian Cross paced behind his mahogany desk. His fingers drummed an anxious rhythm against the polished surface while his sharp, gray eyes scanned the contract spread before him. The Hartwell merger, worth $3 billion, hung by a thread that was quickly fraying. "Sir, the Hartwell representatives have made their position clear," his assistant Jennifer said softly, from the doorway. "They want to see stability in your personal life before they'll sign. A family man," they said. "Someone with roots." Damian's jaw clenched. At 34, he had built Cross Industries from a small tech startup into a global empire, but his reputation as a workaholic bachelor was now threatening everything. The Hartwell family valued traditional partnerships, and his single status had become a liability he couldn't afford. "How long do we have?" he asked, loosening his silver tie. 3 weeks until the board meeting. They want to meet your significant other at the charity gala next Friday." The irony wasn't lost on him. The man who could negotiate billion-dollar deals was stumped by the need for a girlfriend. His last relationship had ended 2 years ago when his ex accused him of loving his company more than her. She wasn't wrong. That evening, Damian found himself in an upscale cafe in Manhattan's theater district, nervously adjusting his watch. The employment agency had been discreet but efficient. "We have the perfect candidate," they'd assured him. "Professional, elegant, and available for extended arrangements." When Celeste Morgan walked through the door, time seemed to slow. She moved with the grace of someone comfortable in her own skin, her auburn hair catching the warm light of the cafe. She wore a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both professional and breathtaking. Her green eyes swept the room, before settling on him with an expression of calm confidence. "Mr. Cross?" Her voice was melodious, with a hint of theatrical training that made every word sound carefully chosen. He stood, extending his hand. "Please, call me Damian. Thank you for coming." As she settled into the chair across from him, Celeste studied, his face with an intensity that made him unexpectedly nervous. "I understand you need an actress for a rather unconventional role," she said, getting straight to business. "I need a fiancé," Damian replied, appreciating her directness. "For 3 weeks, possibly a month. There would be public appearances, business functions, and you'd need to be convincing as someone who cares about me." A small smile played at the corners of her lips. "And what makes you think I can pull off caring about a complete stranger?" The question caught him off guard. Most people would have asked about money first. "The agency said you're one of their best. Broadway trained, with experience in long-term character work." "I am," she said simply. "But I'm also selective about my roles. What's really at stake here, Damian?" Something in the way she said his name made his chest tighten unexpectedly. He found himself telling her everything, about the merger, about his company's future, about the thousands of jobs that depended on this deal going through. She listened without interruption, her eyes never leaving his face. "And after the merger? What happens to your fake fiancé then?" "We have an amicable breakup. Site busy schedules, different life goals, very civilized." Celeste was quiet for a long moment, stirring her untouched coffee. "I have conditions," she said finally. "First, I maintain my integrity. I won't lie about who I am or my background if asked directly. Second, we establish clear boundaries about physical contact and public displays of affection. Third, if at any point this arrangement becomes uncomfortable for either of us, we end it immediately." Damian nodded. "Agreed. The compensation is generous, as I'm sure the agency mentioned." "I'm not doing this for the money," she said, surprising him again. "I'm between shows right now, and I find the challenge intriguing. Creating a believable relationship with someone I've never met? It's the role of a lifetime." They spent the next 2 hours discussing details. her background story. They'd met at a bookstore 6 months ago. Her supposed interests, classical music, art galleries, hiking, her profession, she'd stick close to the truth, mentioning theater work, but keeping it vague. As they prepared to leave, Damien felt compelled to ask, "What made you say yes? Really?" Celeste gathered her purse, considering the question. "You could have lied about the stakes, made it seem less important to get my sympathy. Instead, you were honest about thousands of people depending on this deal. That tells me something about your character." Walking her to the street, Damien was struck by how natural it felt having her beside him. When a cab pulled up, he opened the door for her, their hands brushing briefly as she handed him her business card. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We should probably practice. Being a couple, I mean." "Indeed we should," she replied with that enigmatic smile. "After all, the best performances require rehearsal." As her taxi disappeared into the New York traffic, Damien realized he was looking forward to seeing her again. For the first time in years, something other than business occupied his thoughts as he walked back to his empty penthouse. The woman he'd hired to solve his problem was already creating an entirely new one. She was making him question everything he thought he knew about what he wanted from life. The next morning brought the first challenge. Damien's phone buzzed with a text. From Celeste. "Coffee? We need to discuss our origin story in detail. Meet me at the bookstore where we supposedly met. Make it believable." Standing outside the small, independent bookstore in Greenwich Village, Damien felt more nervous than before any business presentation. Through the window, he could see Celeste browsing the poetry section, looking completely at ease. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door, stepping into what he hoped would be a convincing performance, and not something that would complicate his carefully ordered life beyond repair. Hearts entangled. The charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum was in full swing, its grand hall filled with New York's elite. Celeste moved through the crowd on Damien's arm, every inch the devoted fiancée. She wore an emerald green gown that complimented her eyes, and Damien found himself genuinely proud to have her beside him, forgetting momentarily that their relationship was contractual. "Remember," she whispered as they approached the Hartwell family table, "we had our first kiss in Central Park during a thunderstorm. You were worried about my dress getting ruined." "And you said," he prompted, enjoying their practiced routine more than he should, "that a little rain never hurt anyone who was properly in love." Her smile was perfect, warm and convincing, but Damien caught something deeper in her eyes that made his pulse quicken. Theodore Hartwell, the family patriarch, rose to greet them. His wife, Patricia, examined Celeste with the sharp eye of someone accustomed to spotting pretenders in their social circle. "So this is the woman who finally captured our bachelor's heart," Patricia said, her tone carefully neutral. Celeste laughed, a sound so natural and musical that Damien felt his chest warm. "I prefer to think we captured each other's hearts." Damien has this wonderful way of seeing beauty in unexpected places. He notices things others miss. As she spoke, her hand found his naturally, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. But when she squeezed his hand gently, something electric passed between them that had nothing to do with their performance. The evening progressed flawlessly. Celeste charmed everyone she met, asking thoughtful questions about their businesses and families, remembering details from their previous conversations that she'd researched meticulously. When the orchestra began playing, Damien led her onto the dance floor. "You're incredible at this," he murmured as they swayed together, her body fitting perfectly against his. "So are you," she replied, looking up at him with an expression that seemed too real for comfort. "Sometimes I almost forget we're acting." The admission hung between them as they danced, the pretense becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. When she rested her head against his shoulder during a slow song, Damien felt something shift fundamentally inside him. This was no longer about the merger or his company's future. This was about the woman in his arms who made him feel more alive than he had in years. Later that night, in the privacy of his penthouse, the carefully maintained facade finally cracked. Celeste kicked off her heels and sank onto his leather couch, looking suddenly vulnerable without the armor of their public performance. "Would you like some wine?" Damien offered, loosening his bow tie. "Please." She accepted the glass gratefully, curling her legs beneath her. "We pulled it off tonight. The Hartwells completely believed us." "We make a good team," he agreed, settling beside her on the couch, careful to maintain appropriate distance despite every instinct telling him to move closer. "Damien," she said softly, and something in her voice made him look at her more intently. "I need to tell you something. This arrangement, it's becoming complicated for me." His heart stopped. "Are you backing out?" "No," she said quickly, then laughed shakily. "The opposite, actually. I'm having trouble remembering why we're pretending." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Damien set down his wine glass with deliberate care, his hands trembling. "Slightly, Celeste," he began, but she held up her hand. "Let me finish. I know this wasn't part of our agreement. I know you're paying me to act like I care about you. But the truth is, I'm not acting anymore. Somewhere between our coffee meetings and tonight's performance, I started falling for you, really falling." The words hit him like a physical blow. Everything he'd been trying to deny, every feeling he'd pushed aside as unprofessional, came rushing to the surface. "I can't," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is business. People are counting on me to keep my priorities straight. And what if your priorities are changing?" she asked gently. "What if there's room in your life for something more than just business success?" Before he could stop himself, Damien reached out to cup her face in his hands. "You don't understand. I've built my entire life around control, around keeping emotions separate from decisions. If I let myself feel this—" "What?" she whispered, leaning into his touch. "What happens if you let yourself feel?" Instead of answering, he kissed her. Not the careful public kisses they'd shared for show, but something desperate and honest that revealed everything he'd been trying to hide. She responded immediately, her arms winding around his neck as if she'd been waiting for this moment as long as he had. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "The merger meeting is next week," he said against her forehead. "After that, this arrangement was supposed to end." "It doesn't have to," she replied, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "We could try something real, something that belongs to us instead of to Cross Industries or the Hartwell family. And if it doesn't work? If I'm too set in my ways, too focused on business?" Celeste smiled, the same enigmatic expression that had intrigued him from their first meeting. "Then at least we'll know we tried. Some risks are worth taking, Damien. Especially when the potential reward is everything you never knew you wanted." The merger vote was unanimous. Theodore Hartwell shook Damien's hand warmly, praising not just his business acumen, but his choice in life partners. "Marriage changes a man," the older gentleman said with a knowing smile, "usually for the better." As they left the boardroom, Celeste squeezed Damien's arm triumphantly. The deal was done, his company's future secured, and thousands of jobs protected. By all measures, their arrangement had been a complete success. "So," she said as they stood together in the elevator, "what happens now?" Damien turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Now we find out if what we've built together can survive outside the world of contracts and business arrangements. I want to try, Celeste. I want to see where this goes when it's just us, with no external pressures or artificial timelines." Her smile lit up the small space. "I'd like that too, though I should warn you, dating me for real might be more challenging than hiring me for pretend." "Good," he said, pulling her closer as the elevator reached the ground floor. "I've discovered I like challenges more than I thought." especially when they come with green eyes and the ability to make me forget about everything except being happy. As they walked out into the New York afternoon together, hand in hand without any audience to perform for, Damien realized that his carefully planned contract marriage had indeed backfired spectacularly. Instead of solving his business problem temporarily, it had given him something he'd never expected to find, a future he actually wanted to live, with someone who made every day feel like a new adventure worth taking. The CEO who had spent his entire adult life avoiding emotional complications had finally met his match in a woman who specialized in making the impossible seem absolutely real.